Hey Vivian,
Hey, Faye.
where are you? Your background looks different.
Yeah, it's kind of dark down here. I'm in the basement because it's 10, maybe 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the house.
Oh yeah, it is very hot today. So I guess you are keeping it cool
Hey.
while recording the Keeping It Cool podcast.
Yeah, it is definitely the most popular location in the house on these really hot days. I live with five other people, and sometimes we all huddle down in the basement just because it's the only reasonable place to be.
That sounds so sad to be hiding in a basement. It kind of reminds me of what I imagine the Cold War era to be like. Like, all right, everybody, we cannot live normally anymore. Let's all bunker down in this room. So, right now in my room, it is 87 degrees. I have given up on doing most things today, and I am
Mhm.
thinking about driving to the beach instead.
That's a great idea.
I mean, I think what it really comes down to is that maybe our homes are not well insulated.
Yeah, this sounds like a fundamental climate change problem. Let's try to figure out how other people are adjusting to this.
Hi, and welcome to the Keeping It Cool podcast. I'm Yifei Huang.
And I'm Vivian Patterson.
Every episode, we surface stories about how individuals in our Bay Area communities are contributing to climate action. Today, we are going to talk about homes. When it does get really hot, for those of us who don't have AC, we kind of escape. So I go to the beach, you go in the basement. And those who do have AC, I guess they use a lot of energy. So we hear on those really hot days that the grid is just being hammered.
Right.
And that leads to really high energy bills. But in an ideal world, I think people would have better insulated homes. And some people are already taking actions towards that. We talked to one of them.
I'm Deborah Vasquez, and my background was originally in dietetics and public health. So I transitioned to property management later in my career.
Deborah is a property manager at Sunshine Gardens in Mountain View, a rent-controlled apartment complex built in the 1960s.
Well, there's 44 units, so we estimate 100 to 150 people.
Over the course of the last several years, she managed the building's transformation. In 2015, it consumed more energy than the median comparable building in the US. Now, in 2021, it consumes less energy than 99% of all comparable buildings in the nation. Deborah, how did you get into property management?
Originally, I was thinking, oh, this job's going to work because I can take care of my son while I'm working because it was part-time. I was just starting working here and I wasn't thinking, let's greenify this. We're going to do this thing. I was just thinking what we can do without causing too much, stirring the pot.
I love that you stumbled upon greenification. I often think of it as something that's hard to find if you're not looking for it. It's not the default. But it sounds like that in your case, it wasn't like that at all. So if you were to trace it back to a starting point, what do you think started it all?
I got started with just a flyer in the mail from Recology, which is the trash company here, about reducing trash as well as reducing our residents' trash bills. We had a lot of help from Recology and people that did trash studies. They actually look in your trash and see how much bins you need and just kind of played with it. We adjusted as we saw more paper being thrown away. We got more cardboard bins. So that has been really helpful because people throw so much cardboard away with all the Amazon, the packaging. Recycling didn't seem too hard for the residents to do. And they were able to reduce their trash from 24 cubic yards of trash for this total complex to 15 cubic yards.
Wow, that's reducing it by over 30%.
Yeah, now we have a composting system, which is actually really great. If you just compost, that could be really another way that you can help the planet and also help your trash bill.
So you added recycling, you added compost. What did you do after that?
We worked with Santa Clara Valley Water District to change all the faucet spigots to low flow. They had a program for these free faucet aerators. And they changed out all our shower heads right there. We changed out all the toilets. Some were from the 1960s, so we qualified because there was so much water being used in those old toilets. We changed them all to 1.0 gallons per flush.
So Yifei and I looked this up, and we found that toilets built before 1992 on average use 3.5 to 5 gallons per flush. We are literally flushing this much potable water down the drain, and it takes way more water to flush our toilets than it does for us to stay hydrated.
Yeah, I think normally people drink about 1 gallon of water per day.
That's crazy.
After reducing waste as well as minimizing water use, Deborah turned her focus to insulating the building. She insulated the attic first because it was less invasive. It didn't require going into the individual apartments. Then she insulated apartment walls and double paned the windows. And finally, she did the exterior walls as well. The biggest effect it had was on the residents.
The bills went down by half for heating the gas. That was amazing to see. That was a single most helpful thing that improved our residents' quality of life here because, you can hear people, right? And if you can hear people, you can feel the temperature more easily too, right? If you have really thin walls. So insulating everything was like putting a big blanket on everybody. And so that really helped everybody's quality of life because during the winters, I only had to turn on the heater at night. And in the summer, maybe 3 weeks out of the year, I use a swamp cooler, but I don't need air conditioning the rest of the summer. And that was a big difference from where I lived before, where I couldn't stay in the apartment because it was just so hot.
That is such a cool end result. But how did the residents know that this was going to work out this way? How did you get their buy-in to go into their apartments?
Starting out with the garbage, the recycling, the water, those are all free and they could notice the results right away. I didn't know this at the time, but it was getting their buy-in because they could see that it was helping. And it was helping their water bill, it was helping their trash bill. It's a little bit of discomfort, but I did the walls at the end because that was the most invasive.
You started with these other less invasive things, so by the time you got to the walls, they've already bought into this green vision.
Yeah, exactly. They're real people and they're just like me and you. And I hear them. And it's great because in an apartment community, you have people who are working class, middle class, and you have people who are Stanford and Googlers and high tech. So it allowed us to raise the standard of living for all of our residents, which was incredibly awesome in a public health point of view.
That's so awesome. It's so cool that it goes back to your original roots as a dietitian. But all of this also sounds really hard and expensive. How did you know what to do? Who to contact? How did you get the money for all of this?
A lot of these stuff, I just was paying attention. I was reading the local paper, and that's where I saw BayREN. And those guys were incredible because they did multifamilies. All these people are very highly educated, and they were able to help us from the smallest detail to like contractor referral, like a list of contractors they had to, just how the mechanism works. So I learned a lot doing that as well. And the list that the BayREN people gave me, they had a lot of contractors that were experienced with this. Also, finding rebate programs helped us save money.
If you don't mind me asking, how much did you save with the rebate programs?
It was at least 1/3 to 1/2, depending on the items that we worked at.
That's a lot in rebates. That's awesome that you get so much back and get support in this area and also in contact with those people with the know-how. But it also sounds like there are still these costs that the business needs to take on. Obviously, the residents benefit a lot from these transformations. They see their bills go down. The environment also benefits. But how does the business benefit, or do they benefit?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot to recuperate. I think it's going to take a while, but it is the long term. We can say proudly that we have a full house because it's good to live here. The residents can feel it. and they don't want to leave because it's a good product. I think the owners are happy with all the changes. I mean, they saw how bad it was before. It was falling apart, literally falling apart. And that was from a business model of, use the least capital, earn the most money, right? Most profit and least energy expended. But that doesn't work for the long run. And so that's why they were able to invest in it that much.
That's awesome that the business sees it as a net benefit. And I think you're right. As a renter, Vivian and I were actually just talking about this. Living in an apartment with single paned windows in Palo Alto, I am most certainly going to search for a better insulated apartment in the future. Okay, so it's good for the environment, good for business, good for residents. Was it a good experience for you?
Yeah, so before, as a dietitian, I was seeing one patient at a time improve their own life and to make changes on their own behalf. Now I'm able to impact at least 100 persons. So it's been very impactful. If you see somebody not as a number, but as this is their home, it's a different perspective on which to see things. And I think people who are local owners, they would be invested because maybe they've lived here all their life and they've seen what's going on. I mean, maybe it would inspire them to stay and make things better instead of going to Mars. We're all on the same boat.
That's like so applicable to climate change also. We all live in this one world, so we got to keep it nice.
All right, Vivian. So I feel like Deborah got a lot of help financially through rebates, which I feel like a lot of people, maybe when they approach these sorts of home improvement projects, they think, well, it's going to be a lot of money, it's going to be a lot of effort. And rebates really help with that. And I didn't know much about rebates before this, but I did some research. You want to hear about it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great. So I found this great website. It's called switchison.org. It's all one word. This is a really cool search tool. You enter in your zip code and it shows you some electrification rebates that could apply to you. So I entered my zip code, and unfortunately, I only have one rebate for me.
Oh,
sadly. So that was kind of a low point. And I think it's because I live in the city of Palo Alto. I think Palo Alto just has a different system than most of the Bay Area. But I could save $500 to $1,500 for a heat pump water heater if I were a homeowner. So I was like, well, I'm going to talk to Vivian. So I also searched your zip code.
Oh.
And you have 10 rebates available to you if you were a homeowner.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. What are they?
Most of them are about heat pumps, both for HVAC as well as water heaters. There's a thing called electric panel upgrade. You can get an induction range stovetop.
Oh.
You could get a heat pump dryer. And you could do windows and walls and ductwork, which I guess is insulation.
That's pretty appealing since our house is so drafty. Right. So there's 10 rebates available. If I were a homeowner, I don't know if you have an idea of which one I would start with.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of different options here. It kind of reminds me of something that happened recently. So I went to Bend, Oregon with some friends a few weeks ago. And Bend, Oregon, believe it or not, is the location of the last Blockbuster standing in all of US.
Wow.
A physical Blockbuster store.
Physical Blockbuster store.
Yes, and they're literally like DVDs that you rent.
Do you even have a DVD player?
The house that we were staying at did.
Amazing.
It even had a VHS player.
Amazing.
Yes. We were like, all right, like for celebratory purposes, let's rent something.
Awesome.
But honestly, it took us a long time to figure out what to rent because there are so many options. And that's when I realized that I watch things on streaming services like Netflix, where there's usually already a curated list of movies and shows on the front page that I can pick from. And that narrows down my choices. But you don't have that at Blockbusters.
You got to do it the old-fashioned way.
Exactly. We need a Netflix for home improvement. And that kind of got me thinking about this organization that Deborah talked about called BayREN. That's the word Bay and the letters REN. I looked them up and they have this free consulting service that helps people assess their homes and provides suggestions on how to get started. So I think we should try to get a hold of somebody from BayREN to see if they could be our Netflix for homes.
We managed to get a hold of Jeffrey Liang, who manages the single-family homes program at BayREN. Jeffrey has worked all over the environmental sector, from monitoring water pollution to running a green business program to helping people implement building REACH codes all up and down the Bay Area.
So BayREN stands for the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. We are a collaboration of the 9 counties in the Bay Area. So to the north, Sonoma, to the south, down to Santa Clara, and then up to the east, Alameda, Contra Costa, Solano. This collaborative receives the funds from the California Public Utilities Commission to administer this rebate program. So whenever we pay our PG&E bill or whatever bill we have, there's a small public goods charge. And that's money to go to run these programs to improve the energy efficiency of our buildings. We have my program, but we also have multifamily buildings and commercial buildings.
So what is your role with BayREN?
So I am the single family program manager. We have a couple different offerings for our single family homeowners, but the main one is our Home Plus program, which offers rebates for making these improvements like the insulation, the ceiling, and then improving your HVAC system and your water heater. Since 2013, which is when BayREN formed, we've helped upgrade over 12,000 homes and given out over $24 million. This year we have about 4.25 million. We'll probably go a little bit above that, just looking at how things have been going this year, but kind of help make those improvements happen.
What is your recommendation for homeowners if they want to make the most impact for climate change?
Sure.
If you had to order kind of the top things, what would be most impactful to least impactful?
Right. Yeah, there's this old phrase, reduce before you produce. What that basically means is before you put on that solar and start producing energy, you want to be able to reduce your energy use as much so that you don't have to oversize your solar. It's really about reducing waste, right? Someone else gave the analogy. It's like you have a beautiful new car, but it's running on flat tires. Sure, you have this great system, but if you're not kind of maintaining it properly, you're not getting the best out of it. And so what we see is there are 3 things that pretty much everyone should do and prioritize first. So number 1 is air sealing. It's finding all those little holes throughout your house that leak energy. When we do tests on the house, there's these tests that contractors can do, which is basically putting a huge fan in your door that either blows in air or blows out air and see how fast it leaks out and maintains the same pressure. And so by that, they figured out that the average home has essentially a hole the size of a hula hoop.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of wasted energy.
So all that air goes up into the attic when you're trying to heat the house, and it's making the rats and the spiders really comfortable in the attic.
Oh, that's gross.
And another place, most people don't even need a fan to do this, but you put your hand next to an outlet that's on the exterior of the wall, and you'll feel the breeze coming in. And it's because most of the time those aren't sealed properly. It's funny, I was watching Ratatouille the other day, and there's a scene where, Remy the rat is running throughout the building, like along the pipes, behind the cabinets. All these places are places where you leak air. If we just start sealing those up properly, then you're going to keep the air where you want it.
While I would love Remy the rat specifically to be in my attic cooking like really tasty food, you probably don't want generic spiders and rats crawling around up there being all comfortable. All right, cool. So first, patch up all the holes in your house. What's next?
Secondly, insulation. Just putting insulation in the attic. By California code, you're supposed to have about 14 inches of insulation up in the attic. And that by itself makes a huge difference because it's pretty hot around the Bay Area right now. That keeps the heat from coming from the attic into the rest of the house, just like I was saying. But it also keeps it in the house when you're heating in the winter. It's like the blanket for your house. So that's another really simple thing. Blowing insulation is not a huge, budget buster.
Oh yeah, my house definitely sounds like it needs better insulation. So we talked about patching up the holes. We talked about insulation. What's the last one?
And then the last one I always talk about is duct insulation or sealing the ducts. It's funny, I have the corny joke where duct tape is good for everything but sealing ducts. By California code, you're not even supposed to use duct tape. Quite ironic that it's called duct tape. You're supposed to use something called duct mastic. It's kind of a paste. Because what happens with duct tape is as soon as it gets hot and cold, that adhesive starts to loosen up. Our duct system actually goes through our basement, and you can see all that duct tape starting to release and hang off. The average duct system in America leaks 30%. So again, 30% of that energy that you're paying for is leaking into your crawl space or your attic, making those spiders and rats really happy. If you ever have yellow or pink insulation wrapped around your duct system and you see dark spots around it, that means that insulation is acting as a filter and that dirty air is getting sucked into your duct system through that insulation. And so if we just do those three things, then we're probably going to start saving a lot of energy and just feeling more comfortable in the house and actually blowing a lot less dust in the house.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that aspect of like you're literally blowing dust in and around your house.
Exactly.
Vivian, you got to get your ducks in a row.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, this is really great to know. Thanks for the pointer about checking for dark spots in the insulation to make sure that your air is not leaking out. I think that's super helpful to know, and I feel like I'm going to go do that now.
I have like so many questions following up on this, and I guess I'll limit myself to one non sequitur,
Sure.
Which is if your ducts are wrapped in insulation and you see that stuff coming through, do you have to like rip open the insulation, seal the duct, and then like blow more insulation in? Is that like the order of operations?
So there's a couple different strategies. And what I will say is our contractors, I kind of make the analogy, they're like the doctors or nurses of the home. You come in and they run those tests on you. And based on that test, give you a diagnosis. This is what's wrong with you. Then they give you a prescription. Here's what you should do. We should think of our homes the same way. There's a test. It's called the blower door test where you blow air into the house and see how fast it leaks out. They do the exact same thing for the ducts. It's called a duct blaster test. And that's the best way. That's how they know that it's 30% leakage. And then kind of go around and figure out where that leakage is. These contractors can go in, identify it, seal it up properly, and then they'll go back and test it. Because for our rebate program, you have to get below a certain amount of duct leakage to qualify for that rebate.
I am learning so much today. I'm so excited. I guess 2 follow-up questions is, of the 3 big ticket items that you just mentioned, ductwork, insulation, and sealing and weatherization, do you have a rough estimate of how much impact it has to do just these 3 things, either in like CO2 emissions or maybe dollars?
Oh, that is one of those it depends questions, because it kind of depends on how much you're starting. If you're like starting with a $300, $400 energy bill, especially during the winter, then you should start saving quite a bit there. And we even have a contractor. I mean, this is a new home that he remodeled, but he made a guarantee that the utility bill would be under $50 a month because he was so confident in how efficient he did everything. And this was a pretty significant home in the Oakland Hills.
That's incredible. I am renting in Millbrae and live in a fairly large, fairly old home. And our energy bill for heating in April, so like not that cold anymore, was close to $500. Yeah. I mean, it's an old drafty house, so that's no surprise.
And those are the houses that are the best candidates, honestly, for this. Like the leakier it is, the easier it is to improve it.
I'll have to tell my roommates who are staying on there.
Yeah.
So after you get this low-hanging fruit, these 3 big ticket items, could you describe some additional actions to take? So obviously they won't be like as dramatic of an energy savings or a conservation effort, but I think there's a lot of other things that people can do to continue improving home energy footprint.
Yes. So those 3 items I mentioned are like filling up your tires so that it's working. Then you want to start looking at the engine, right? The HVAC system, the water heating, because, and I did this Goldilocks video that you can find on our YouTube page. Of course, the first home that Goldilocks visits is too cold because it's all leaky and all that air is going out. But the second home, they fixed those issues, but it was too hot because the furnace was oversized. That's why we actually give a rebate for downsizing your HVAC system. When you have a system that's too big for your distribution, you get this cycling on and off. Like hot air blows in really quickly for 10 minutes and then it shuts off. And so that's really inefficient for the system, but also bad for your comfort and health too, because it's continually blowing all this dust and hot air into the house. So once you fix the distribution, work on like the system, especially if you're kind of getting to the end of life of your furnaces. And on the water heater side, after HVAC, the water heater is probably the biggest energy use. What we're doing now, since our electricity is getting cleaner and cleaner, we're starting to incentivize people moving from gas water heaters to something called a heat pump water heater because it uses heat pump technology. So it's 3 to 4 times more efficient because it's not generating heat, it's just moving heat from the surrounding areas into the water. By doing that, because we're moving to a cleaner energy source, gas to electric, that reduces our carbon emissions and fight climate change.
So to summarize, first, you should patch up all the holes in your house. Secondly, improve the insulation. And thirdly, fix your ducting. After that, you want to look at the air heating and cooling system, which is the HVAC, and then the water heaters. So all of this will reduce the amount of heating and cooling that you need, since your home is better sealed, which is better on your wallet. And it's also better for the environment, especially if you're switching to electric heat pump technology, because it reduces carbon emissions.
I have a question. So I think you've given us a really good way to think about all the different home improvements and how to prioritize them. So going back to what you said about reduce before you produce, that was really helpful. But when it actually comes down to doing the work, if I were a homeowner, I would need to find a contractor, and there are so many contractors out there. I would also need to figure out whether I qualify for these rebates or not. And I think that can be tricky to navigate. So do you have tips for homeowners who are going through that?
At the end of the day, we know that there's so many programs out there, not just our program. We have a helpline called the Home Energy Advisors. The number is 866-878-6008. And they are essentially a no-cost helpline. You can give them a call and they will walk you through, you are looking for heat pump water heater. Well, here are a couple contractors in your area, and here's what to look for. We can review your bids for you, and they walk people all the way through that process to getting the rebate. And so all our efforts is to get people to a contractor or get them to our energy advisors so that someone can essentially be their wilderness guide through this process.
That's super cool. Some of our friends are becoming these new homeowners, and I'm definitely going to tell them everything that I've learned today and direct them towards the consulting service. That sounds like a great way to just know all the things you can be doing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's their job. It's not just our program, but they keep like a solutions database. So even water conservation, even everything that you can think of. If we can't help you, we'll find someone who can.
We're kind of curious, how do you reach people? Is it mostly a word of mouth thing? Is it, you send out a bunch of flyers and hope that people come find you?
Yes. A lot of people come to this program not for the energy savings, but the health and safety aspect. And I think as more people realize, hey, my house is getting smoky from all the wildfires, people are realizing I probably should do something about how drafty this house is. So definitely people are more in touch with how their house is performing now.
That's so interesting. I think the Bay Area is often seen as this place that has the perfect climate. Redwood City's tagline is even climate best by government test, right? And you see that on a giant sign over Broadway. But what we're realizing now is that because of climate change, that is no longer the case. And what you are seeing at BayREN, people coming to you and saying, I am uncomfortable in my home, that only corroborates this shift in climate that we're seeing throughout the world. And also, this type of discomfort is something that I am going through as a renter right now during these heat waves. But a lot of these resources that we've talked about, these resources are not available to me as a renter. So does BayREN have resources for renters?
We have the Rising Sun Greenhouse Call program where a local youth, they're learning, this is part of their green jobs for them. They essentially walk you through how to make some improvements and send you out a kit of LEDs and water saving devices and smart strips and walk you through that. It's always nice to get the benefits, but to help a young person get started in their career and learn something about the environment too. And then also, if we can get in touch with the landlord, whether it's a multifamily like 5+ or a 1 to 4 unit, which would qualify for my program, we would be happy to help that renter get through to the landlord. And I've tried to do that for myself too, when I was a renter. And we know it's a little tough, but hopefully eventually we can help the landlords understand that making these improvements to their building also improves the value and there's benefits for everybody. So we can definitely help renters in some way.
Definitely look into that.
What's next for BayREN?
Yeah, so even though we've given out $24 million in rebates, probably very few people have heard about us. And so my philosophy has always been to build partnerships so that we can leverage each other's voices.
I love that, like building a community around climate change. I think that's what we strive to do here on the podcast as well. And I think it's great that you're helping people offset all these costs of their home improvements.
And at the end of the day, it's not even the final cost that matters, right? It's cash flow, right? And then also we, again, can't discount the non-energy benefits, the comfort, the health. Unfortunately, I do get that question a lot. Sometimes our contractors are more expensive because they take a little longer. They do the right tests. They do all those things. People buy on value, not on cost. We spend so much time in our homes, and we probably have no issue spending like $1,000 for our iPhone. It provides a lot of benefits for you, right? And so as we look at our homes, I want people to start thinking, hey, we have like 19th century, 20th century technology in our homes, and it has an effect on our comfort and our health. Maybe it's time we upgrade to state-of-the-art technology.
Don't worry, our podcast is going to help make talking about HVAC systems very sexy.
Good.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of information.
Yeah, it definitely was. Was there anything that you found especially interesting or surprised you?
Yeah, definitely. I think normally when I think of making a house more green, I think all the sexy things like put a solar panel on or like build a wind turbine in your backyard.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I think of those things. What I found so interesting from the conversation with Jeffrey is that the best way to make your house more eco-friendly is actually doing all the work that kind of just all this low-tech work, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. It's reduce before you produce, as Jeffrey said, but it feels actually really analogous to recycling, right? First, use less, then, do something else.
Yeah, exactly.
As you said earlier, you should get all of your ducks in a row.
Ducks. Quack, quack. Oh, yeah, Vivian. Don't be a lame duck.
Oh, rude. Well, with all of the old stuff in your house, you might as well be a sitting duck. It's okay. It's okay. Pretty soon after all these renovations, we'll be the mighty duck.
Oh, yes. And all you listeners out there, you could be the lucky duck. You could be the lucky duck. Have you been saying ducked or duck?
I've been saying ducked, but it is ambiguous. It's hard to tell.
And all you listeners out there, you could be the lucky duck that lands all these rebates.
Woo!
In our next episode, we will dig more into what renters can do to combat climate change. Stay tuned. Thank you to Deborah Vasquez for sharing what she did to improve energy efficiency at the Sunshine Gardens apartment complex. Thank you to Jeffrey Liang for teaching us so much about homes and rebates. Thank you to Stephanie Lai, who designed our logo, and Deep Talk for the original theme music. And lastly, this wouldn't be possible without our wonderful team at the Keeping It Cool podcast. That's Vivian Patterson, Wendy Cho, and me, Yifei Huang. Stay tuned for our next episode.